Welcome to Let's Talk Criterion, and in this edition we take a look at Martha Coolidge's film Not a Pretty Picture from 1975. Martha Coolidge was the first female president of the Directors Guild of America, and that is quite an achievement. Her breakthrough documentary short, Old-Fashioned Woman, where she has a frank talk with her grandmother Mabel Tilton about her growing up in the late 19th century, brought her to the attention of the international filmmaking community. Since the days of the cave paintings, people have been using art to make sense of the world and better comprehend their place in it. So sometimes the healthiest way to process a traumatic personal experience is by taking it apart and reassembling it on your own terms. And that's exactly what director Martha Coolidge did with her bold 1976 debut feature, Not a Pretty Picture, an ahead of its time documentary hybrid in which we watch the filmmaker restage and re-examine the night when, as a 16-year-old boarding school student in 1962, she was raped by an acquaintance while she was visiting New York. Now, the film just doesn't probe Coolidge's own recollections of that evening, it also incorporates the memories of her then roommate, as well as the input of cast members drawing upon their own personal experiences with sexual assault. We have dramatic reenactments taking place, which are interrupted by interviews and provocative, sometimes messy, on-screen discussions. Coolidge appears in front of the camera often in the film, rewriting scenes on the fly while relentlessly questioning her own interpretations and motivations. And as we watch the movie being made, we're also witnessing an artist taking back control of an evening during which it was violently wrested away from her, finding catharsis in the act of creation itself. Not a Pretty Picture is such a valuable, if somewhat upsetting, experience. Coolidge is a great listener as well, and she cast the lead actress Michelle Manenti after learning that she'd survived a similar assault. And it's incredibly affecting to watch these two women try and work through their trauma together, wondering at times what exactly they've gotten themselves into here, making a public exhibition out of personal and painful traumatic memories. Co-star Jim Carrington looks uncannily like actor James Franco, unfortunately, given the circumstances, and it can get pretty uncomfortable too during his tone-deaf contributions to the discourse. The element I think that works in theory better than it does in practice, though, is having Coolidge's high school roommate, that's Anne Munstock, playing herself. That's maybe one Brechtian device too many, as she is an obvious 28-year-old woman amidst a cast of teenagers. And also, Munstock isn't very good. Clearly, she's a stage actress who isn't modulating her performance for the proximity of the camera. Still, it's welcome to hear her perspective on things, and how disorienting it must be to find yourself reliving your girlhood years later from an old friend's point of view. This film's gutsy, powerful, and has ramifications that will rattle around your head for a long time after the closing credits roll. Coolidge interviews the performers on screen as well as directing them and encouraging them to improvise. Now, the assault is the movie's central and pivotal scene, but nearly as compelling as the long takes of Manenti wrestling with Carrington as he urges her to just please relax, is the sight of Coolidge herself watching that struggle with her hand over her mouth. The staging and dissection of the characters' motivations and their reactions, from how young Martha Michelle freezes, fights back, and eventually relents, to how Carrington's performance makes the predator's manipulative orchestration of the night's events obvious, seemed to be a means for Coolidge to stand on the outside looking in and confirm for herself and the viewer that this was not her or any survivor's fault. It's not clear if the making of Not a Pretty Picture was a healing exercise for either Coolidge or indeed Menente, or whether that was Coolidge's intention in the first place. As we watch the 28-year-old Martha gaze at the 16-year-old Martha, the distance between the two women collapses. Art may not be able to close the door on such an incident, but it may help dig out enough of a tunnel ahead in order to keep going. Coolidge frames Not a Pretty Picture with her own expressions of vulnerability as well. The film begins with a school recital performance of the most achingly pure of folky love songs. That's The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, made famous of course by Roberta Flack, but sung in the film by Coolidge herself and shown in long shot from the perspective of two young boys smirking in the audience. It ends with the filmmaker acknowledging the shame that she felt and the lasting damage that the rapist inflicted on her. Born of trauma, given a cautionary title, this is a movie of steely determination. Coolidge takes possession of her narrative and holds on to it tight. The result is heartfelt and ruthless as a result. Now, Coolidge had attracted attention with the earlier documentary she'd made about her family. I mentioned that earlier. But Not a Pretty Picture led a curiously circumscribed existence. Its New York premiere, for instance, at the Whitney Museum in March of 1976, was apparently ignored by the New York Times and seemingly the Village Voice, which, in something surely crazy-making for the filmmaker, they also ran a long article the following week, somewhat ironically headlined, Rape Fantasies of Women. Not a Pretty Picture was shown mainly in media centres and at festivals, including the Second International Festival of Women's Films, and later in 1976. It ultimately got Coolidge the assignment to direct a commercial youth film, and that, of course, was Valley Girl, which, although indifferently reviewed in 1983, has since developed a cult following, thanks, of course, in part to the presence in the film of Nicolas Cage. Coolidge has enjoyed a long productive career, but she never made another Not a Pretty Picture, and neither, to be fair, has anyone else. Now, the other Coolidge film that I'd like to recommend is Rambling Rose. It's an adaptation of Calder Williams' 1972 novel starring Laura Dern as a clumsy, promiscuous housekeeper in the Depression-era South. Dern's real-life mother, Diane Ladd, provides the movie's moral backbone as the lady of the house, bearing a distinct resemblance to the matriarch in Coolidge's Old-Fashioned Woman. Not a Pretty Picture comes to the collection on Blu-ray, and it contains the following special features. We have a new 4K digital restoration, and that's supervised and approved by director Martha Coolidge with uncompressed mono soundtrack. We have an interview with Coolidge herself conducted by the filmmaker Alison Anders. Old-Fashioned Woman, that's the documentary I mentioned from 1974 from Coolidge about her grandmother. And a written essay, of course, by the film critic Molly Haskell. And the cover art for Not a Pretty Picture is designed by a regular contributor to Criterion, and that is Polly Deadman. Not a Pretty Picture has a running time of 82 minutes and comes in a 1:3:3:1 aspect ratio, and it releases on Blu-ray in the US only on Tuesday the 20th of August at Spine 12:30. And of course, there's been much comment and criticism in the last few weeks over the recent announcement of CC40, a 40-title compendium of classic and contemporary films in Blu-ray, which celebrates the 40 years that Criterion has been in existence and the many visits and recommendations by guests in the Criterion Closet videos. Now, the set is due for release on Tuesday the 19th of November, and of course there's already speculation on whether that will be included in the November Barnes & Noble sale, given its very high price point, and of course we can make further savings on that set. I won't be purchasing it as I already have all those films in the set, but I don't think it's really aimed at us season collectors. I'm delighted to announce that we've just passed 800 subscribers at the time of recording, and I'd therefore like to thank all my latest subscribers, many of whom joined us over the Barnes & Noble sales month in July. Welcome to Let's Talk Criterion. In the next edition, we have a double bill of Albert Brooks comedies. That's Real Life and Mother, with Albert Brooks and the delightful Debbie Reynolds, both debuting in the collection on 4K UHD. So that will be something to look forward to. Though, until next time, from me, as always, it's goodbye, and above all, good Criterion viewing.